The hour for lunch had long passed. It was nearly 2 o'clock, and the emperor would never allow me to eat in a carriage. He had a fine reason for this, which was that a woman ought never to want to eat. These precious arguments, added to the pangs of hunger, made me so angry that I had a terrible headache. Consequently, when we arrived at Breda at 4 o'clock, I thought I should be obliged to stay there. However, the emperor, who treated us like grenadiers, forced us to continue our journey after his lunch. We took our meal in a wretched chateau which formerly belonged to the Prince of Orange. Breda is a small and rather pretty town of from 7,000 to 8,000 inhabitants with excellent fortifications. After the emperor had received the local officials, we resumed our journey. I was in such a bad temper that the emperor was displeased, but feeling quite indifferent, I let him scold as much as he liked without answering him. There is nothing which quiets men so soon as this method. They are insufferable beings, and should I ever come back in another world, I would certainly not make a second marriage. The road was still very monotonous, and the weather dreadful. The wind blew horribly, and the rain was so heavy that we were inundated. The emperor, however, contrary to his usual practice, found the atmosphere stifling, so opened all the windows for the pleasure of opposing my wishes. At 8 o'clock, the Marechal, Duke de Reggio, with several generals, came to our carriage and assured us that we were only an hour's journey from Bois-le-Duc. However, we did not arrive there until midnight. Fortunately, my waiting maid was there, for I felt so ill and fatigued that I went to bed directly without eating. I had dreadful pains in the stomach with fever. Added to this, there was so much noise in the courtyard that it was impossible to sleep. Having sent for Monsieur Brudier, the consoling news was brought to me that he had been left back at Breda. Finally, at 1 o'clock, I heard my door open, for it had neither bolt nor key, and someone entered the room very softly. It was Prince de Neuchâtel, who, imagining himself in the emperor's room, on seeing me was very embarrassed. At last, at 2 o'clock, Monsieur Juin arrived, half dead, and covered from head to foot with clay, for he had fallen into a hole. I begged him to give me some antipyrin hetera. He went to fetch the little medicine chest, but finding all the bottles broken, I had to resign myself and wait until I should recover without medicine. At 3 o'clock, the Duchess de Montebello arrived. Her carriage had struck for 4 hours in the sand, in spite of all the efforts of Monsieur de Saint-Aignan and Prince Aldobrandini. When these gentlemen saw that they could not extricate the carriage, they unyoked the horses, and using a bag of oats for a saddle, went to seek help at Bois-le-Duc, while Monsieur de Beauharnais, instead of assisting them, remained in the carriage, grumbling because he could not get on. The Duc de Bassano lost patience because his coachman would not proceed, and got out of his carriage, prepared to chastise the poor wretch severely. But heaven punished him, for he fell into a pool up to his neck. Although in this predicament he became very polite, the peasant would not pull him out. He was therefore obliged to remain there until another carriage came to the rescue. There was indeed a great deal to laugh at next day when the company related their adventures, but even more amusing experience was in store for the Duchess de Montebello. I was so fatigued on the 7th that I did not get out of bed till dinner time. Moreover, the town and its suburbs were not sufficiently interesting to tempt me to visit them. The emperor went out to inspect the fortifications and receive the local officials. I spent the day in talking to the Duchess, for all my books and work had been left at Antwerp. I was very badly lodged and had only my bedroom, which was dreadfully damp. The gentleman had been buying contraband goods all day and persuaded the Duchess to do the same in the evening. Messieurs de Saint-Aignan and de Bondy came to fetch her in a hired carriage. The coachman, who apparently had driven them the evening before, thought he knew the place to which he was to take them, so they stopped at the door of a house and began to mount the stairs when the mistress of the house arrived with a light in her hand. At the sight of this woman, the gentleman became much embarrassed and besought the Duchess to come downstairs again, telling her at the same time that they had mistaken the warehouse. She kept repeating, "It does not matter, I will go up just the same," until they were obliged to admit they had been altogether misdirected, and that this was a house where they had acquaintances whom it was impossible for them to present to her. The Duchess, however, still insisted, whereupon they were obliged to tell her that it was a house of ill fame. This made her furious. The following morning, on leaving Bois-le-Duc, we passed through the whole town, which is rather pretty and has a population of 12,000, all of whom are Catholics. The road was just as ugly as on the previous day as far as the spot where we took our lunch, and we were unable to proceed faster than a walking pace. We lunched at the house of a pastor, which was remarkable for its cleanliness. From there we continued as far as Geertruidenberg, where we waited an interminable time to cross a small river in a ferry boat. While the emperor visited the fortifications, we continued our journey still at the same pace. I was with the Queen of Westphalia, who was in a very bad temper with the king, perhaps justifiably, for such a husband must make her very unhappy. I pity her sincerely. The road improved 5 leagues from Bergen up soon. We thought it delightful after our experience of the last 2 days. Nothing but meadows, gardens, magnificent fields, and charming Dutch villages were visible. We continued our route around the Meuse by the side of the famous Moerdijk, which is an arm of the river and forms the boundary between the French Empire and Holland. There are many fortifications. Here we crossed the Meuse, which becomes very narrow, and we're only 15 leagues from Amsterdam. What would I not have given to have been able to visit this fine capital? But when one travels with the emperor, one learns to forego all ideas of pleasure trips. We were obliged to cross some more dikes in ferry boats, arriving at last at 9 in the evening at Bergen op Zoom, which is well fortified and has from 8,000 to 12,000 inhabitants. The houses here were dreadful, but we were put up in the best. The wooden ladder did service for a staircase, and our apartments consisted of 2 rooms. Nevertheless, the emperor insisted on staying there another day. The other houses were in the same style.